In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NHL games happening on January 31st, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Colorado Avalanche versus Detroit Red Wings. When Colorado rolls into Detroit for this one, it feels less like a random stop on the calendar and more like a status check on who actually scares the rest of the league right now. You have a team that sits right near the top in just about every meaningful team category, pouring in around 3.88 goals per night while giving up only about 2.48, which is a nasty combination for anyone trying to keep up. Game after game, they tilt the ice, living in the offensive zone with shot totals sitting in the mid-30s while they hold opponents down in the high 20s or lower, and that sort of constant pressure wears on teams over 60 minutes. It is the kind of style where, even when they are not flying around trading chances, they quietly squeeze the life out of you shift by shift. What makes that even more uncomfortable is that the star talent at the top is not just big names on paper, it is driving that engine at 5-on-5 on a nightly basis. They have their do-it-all center controlling pace through the middle, their elite puck-moving defender jumping into the rush and running the game from the back end, and both are healthy and active coming into this matchup. Behind that, the special teams picture is a little funny because the power play has not been as terrifying as in previous years, sitting in a more ordinary range, but the penalty kill and overall defensive structure pick up the slack with smart pressure and quick exits. Since they reshaped their goaltending, bringing in a new starter from San Jose and giving him a real runway, the crease has settled down, and his record, with well over twice as many wins as losses and a goals against average in the mid-twos with a save percentage just above .910, reflects that steadying effect. On the other side, Detroit is not exactly rolling out a welcome mat. Their overall mark sits around 32 to 17 to 6, and at home they are roughly 15 to 8 to 1, which means this building has not been an easy place to walk into this season. They score just over 3 goals per outing and allow just under 3, and they typically keep opponents near 28 shots on goal, which speaks to a team that has bought into playing a responsible brand of hockey, not just trading rushes for fun. Since late November, they have been on a serious heater, something like 19 to 5 to 4 over that stretch, and that is usually where confidence starts to feel very real in a room. They also have their own star power story, with a veteran winger who has refound his spark and recently climbed to the top of the scoring list among players from his country, still active and in the lineup, which adds a little storyline flavor on its own. In net, their starter has quietly pieced together a strong season of his own, sitting somewhere in the neighborhood of 21 to 10 to 2 with a goals against average around 2.61 and a save percentage holding near .905, including a long run of wins where he has looked calm and composed. That mix of a hot goalie, a confident group, and a home crowd that can get loud in a hurry means this is not some soft landing spot, even for a top-tier opponent. Even with all that, when you strip away the noise and look at the way these two teams usually tilt the shot battle, the territory battle, and the quality battle, the edge still leans toward the group that drives play more consistently and is treated by futures markets as a different tier of contender. They are used to going on the road, posting something like a 15 to 6 to 5 mark away from home, dealing with hostile crowds, and turning the volume down by hanging onto the puck and forcing the home side to chase the game instead of feeding off the energy in the building. Health-wise, both teams bring most of their key pieces, though you still have a familiar absence on Colorado's side with their longtime captain out long-term, and Detroit is missing a young defender on injured reserve, but the main cores are intact, which keeps this from turning into a depth war alone. So when you weigh the current form, the shot and goal profiles, and the way each roster is built to control games at 5-on-5, it naturally nudges you toward the team that has been living in that true contender space for a while now rather than the one that is still trying to fully break into that club. As our first pick for this matchup, the Colorado Avalanche money line is our full game side pick. You are looking at two teams whose season averages combine for right around 7 goals per night, with Colorado near 3.88 and Detroit close to 3.07. And that kind of raw math makes it easy to picture a track meet where the red light hardly gets a chance to cool down. Fans love that idea, of course, because cheering for a fence is way more fun than hoping for a chess match, and both of these clubs carry reputations that lean more towards skill and creativity than a slow, grinding style. Here is the thing though, once you set that surface picture aside and really sit with what they allow, the story shifts a bit. Together, they give up only about 5.4 goals per game, which is quite a gap from what their scoring suggests, and that alone hints at games that settle into more controlled, structured rhythms than people might expect. Colorado is especially stingy in terms of volume, holding opponents to around 26.7 shots most nights, and that kind of shot suppression usually drags totals down, simply because fewer pucks are even reaching the net. Detroit is not far behind, typically keeping opponents near 28 shots, and that steady diet of limited chances helps their goalie see the puck cleanly and keeps games in a manageable lane. Special teams add another little twist. Colorado's power play sits in a more modest range this season, not quite at that automatic level that used to make penalties feel like instant trouble, which trims some of the easy scoring you might have assumed here. Their penalty kill, on the other hand, has remained a strength, living in the mid-80s for efficiency, and when you pair that with their 5-on-5 structure, it means a lot of opposing power plays in with clears rather than goal horns. Detroit's penalty kill is more middle of the pack, not terrible but not dominant, which can create some swings, but it is not enough on its own to flip this into a wild special team showcase unless the whistles really take over. With their starter on a hot streak and Colorado's newer #1 providing steady work at the other end, you also have two goaltenders who are capable of turning dangerous looks into frustrating near misses. The context around the game matters too. This is an early afternoon puck drop, around 1 p.m. Eastern, and those matinee starts often come with slightly sleepy first periods, legs that take a bit longer to wake up, and coaches leaning into structure rather than trading rushes right away. On a bigger stage with more eyes on them, both benches know that one ugly turnover at the blue line can swing momentum hard, so players tend to make the safer read, which again nudges totals down rather than up. If you look at the recent results, you can see hints of that more measured script already. Detroit has had a stretch that included a 5-1 win where they locked things down nicely, a 3-1 loss where they were the ones getting squeezed, and a 4-3 shootout heartbreaker that only really opened up late. Colorado has mixed in tighter games as well, with scores in that 3-2 or 4-1 neighborhood when their goalie is dialed in and the defense is keeping things simple in front of him. So while the season averages and star names might tempt you to picture a 7 or 8 goal fireworks show, the combined profile of strong shot suppression, renewed defensive buy-in, a relatively high posted total, and two goalies in solid form points more toward a mid-range scoreline like 3-2 or 4-2 than a wild, pond hockey-style race. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. New York Rangers versus Pittsburgh Penguins. Picture a packed afternoon crowd in Pittsburgh, towels spinning, everyone already buzzing before warm-ups even finish. You have a home team sitting at 27-14-11, near the top of the division, and playing like the group nobody really enjoys seeing on their schedule right now. They just rolled through Western Canada in style, came back home and poured goals on Chicago, and they have done it while juggling real adversity, with key defenders on injured lists, a suspended winger, and veteran stars who have been nursing bumps and even sitting out practice recently rather than cruising through on autopilot. That mix of banged-up big names and hungry depth can be messy for some clubs, but here it has turned into a weird kind of fuel because it forces the coach to spread responsibility and it gives those so-called bottom six guys a real license to matter, which they have gladly taken, turning third and fourth lines into something closer to pressure units than coffee breaks. In net, the rotation has settled into a pretty steady picture, with two goaltenders who are not perfect but give you a respectable save percentage and a goals against number that keeps this team close almost every single night, and that stability has a calming effect when you are backing a favorite, especially one that already scores more than 3 goals per game on average and does not leak much at the other end. On the other side, you have a proud Rangers team dragging a 22-27-6 record into the building, stuck at the bottom of the same division, living through a stretch where wins have been rare and frustration has been pretty easy to see on faces and in body language. Their injury sheet reads like a who is who of players they really cannot afford to lose, with top offensive talent, their best puck-moving defender, and their #1 goalie all listed as unavailable, so the workload keeps sliding onto a few healthy stars, some youngsters, and a veteran backup netminder whose numbers this season frankly look like a reminder that time catches everyone eventually. That combination of a surging, deep home side with a strong scoring profile, a solid penalty kill, and a true home ice buzz against a visiting group that is short on key skaters, leaning on an older goalie, and coming in on a prolonged skid is exactly the kind of recipe that, over the long haul, tilts this type of matchup toward one particular bench, especially if you have ever sat there with a ticket and felt that little knot of regret when you went against a hot, healthier team in this kind of spot. As our first pick for this matchup, the Pittsburgh Penguins money line is our full game side pick. Recent Penguins scores might tempt you to picture pure chaos, but the underlying numbers and context actually paint something more controlled. Yes, they have been lighting it up lately, hanging crooked numbers on teams and making highlight reels, and that is fun for fantasy and social media, but underneath the fireworks you still see a club that allows under 30 shots a night, keeps opponents under 3 goals per game on average, and carries a penalty kill that sits in the mid-80s by percentage, which is the profile of a team that knows how to choke the air out of a game once it settles. Their power play is strong, so they can spike the total with 1 or 2 quick strikes, but 5-on-5 they are not a reckless track meet outfit. They are a structured group that can smother the neutral zone, stack layers in front of their goalies, and turn a third period into something closer to a slow closing of a door than a street race, especially if the schedule is heavy and legs need to be managed a bit. Across from them, the Rangers come in averaging under 3 goals per game, taking fewer shots than their opponents, and missing several of the very players who usually juice their playmaking and shooting talent, which naturally drags their offensive ceiling down and leaves them relying even more on point shots, second chances, and the occasional moment of individual magic. With their main goaltender sidelined, they can still get a hot night from whoever is in the crease, but that safety net that lets skaters cheat a bit for offense is not really there right now, so it makes sense for them to aim for something tighter and more conservative, especially on the road and on national television, where nobody wants to get embarrassed. Put all of that together, and the most reasonable picture is not a game where both teams trade rushes like a video game, but one where chances come in pockets, special teams matter, and once the scoring settles into a rhythm the pace tilts toward careful rather than wild, which makes a quieter, lower scoring script feel more trustworthy than betting on a full-blown goal fest just because of a few recent blowouts. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Carolina Hurricanes versus Washington Capitals. Carolina rolls into this matchup looking like a team that knows exactly who it is and has known for a while now. They have that calm, veteran feel, the kind of group that treats a road game like another day at the office, even after that wild late comeback against Utah that had everyone talking. That sort of finish does not just give you points in the standings, it gives a room a little swagger, a sense that even if they trail late, the script is never really closed. Washington, on the other hand, feels more like a mood swing in jersey form right now. There are stretches where they look fast, physical, emotionally charged, feeding off the building and throwing hits like it is playoff hockey in late spring, and then there are nights where the legs look heavy and the details slip just enough to cost them. That recent road trip was a perfect snapshot, big emotional moments, a clutch shootout win, but also some rough losses and long stretches where they chase the game instead of steering it. It is not that they cannot beat good teams, they clearly can. It is that they struggle to live in that top gear every single night. Here is the thing, stylistically this is a clash between structure and streakiness. Carolina loves a repeatable recipe, lots of puck touches, clean exits, heavy pressure on entries, then wave after wave of shifts that all look pretty similar. They tilt the ice with volume and patience, they pile up shots, and they quietly give up as few clean looks against as almost anyone, which makes life very comfortable for their goalies. It is not flashy, but it is the kind of hockey that travels well because there is very little that depends on crowd noise or momentum bounces. Washington's game has more emotional swing built into it. They can run a heavy forecheck, they can get in your face, and when they forecheck in layers, they look nasty to play against. But they also lean a lot on big individual pushes, a huge night from a scorer, or a hot goaltender standing tall while they try to sort things out in front of him. On nights where the details sag, that style can turn into long defensive zone shifts, and against a team like Carolina that likes to live in your end, that is a rough way to spend 60 minutes. Special teams tilt a bit toward the structured side here too. Carolina's power play has real bite and their penalty kill is steady, which fits the personality of a team that does not beat itself very often. Washington's power play can still feel dangerous when it snaps the puck around, but it has also had plenty of nights where it looks more like a missed chance than a momentum builder. When you stack that on top of even strength play, the team that already leans on territory and discipline gets another small edge every time the whistle goes. Health and depth matter as well, and this is where the gap feels wider than the names on the back of the jerseys might suggest at first glance. Carolina's key pieces in the spine of their lineup are available, their top forwards, their steady defenders, and that goalie duo that has quietly turned into a strength instead of a question. Washington is still patching holes. Pierre-Luc Dubois is working his way back from major surgery, not in the mix yet, and that is a huge chunk of the center depth parked in street clothes instead of attacking the middle of the ice. In net, they are nursing one goalie through an upper body issue, another through a knock that flared up in a recent game, and have Clay Stevenson up from the AHL to stabilize the depth chart. It is not a disaster, but it is a lot of tape and glue against a team that is already very good at exposing any tiny crack in your structure. So when you pull all of that together, recent form, style, depth, injuries, and the way these two groups tend to handle tight, structured games, the more reliable side still sits with the team that can roll out its usual blueprint and trust it to hold up in a noisy building. As our first pick for this matchup, the Carolina Hurricanes money line is our full game side pick. Carolina's whole identity leans toward controlling how much actually happens in a game. They fire plenty of pucks on net themselves, but what really jumps out when you watch a full 60 is how little they give up the other way. Their gap through the neutral zone, their layers at the blue line, and the way their forwards track back all squeeze the ice until opponents are living on outside shots and hopeful deflections. That kind of structure usually keeps games in that 3-2, 4-2 pocket, where every mistake feels big because there just are not that many total chances to go around. Washington's preferred version of Caps hockey fits that script more than it might seem at first glance. Nick Dowd talked about it recently: tight, physical, simple hockey, where they forecheck, finish checks, and lean on their goaltender to clean up what gets through. When they are playing the way they want, you see more chip and chase and board battles than wide-open rushes off the stretch pass. That is good old-fashioned trench hockey, and trench hockey usually drags the scoreboard down with it. The recent meetings between these two have already hinted at the kind of tempo we are likely to see again. One game ended 3-2, the other 4-1, both of them feeling like playoff dress rehearsals rather than shinny. There were hits, there were scrums, there were long shifts where one side hemmed the other in, but there was not that constant back and forth trading of breakaways that you see in some other matchups. Scheduling adds another quiet nudge. Carolina is staring at a back-to-back, with another game waiting immediately after this one. When that is the case, veteran teams usually trim a bit of the risk out of their game. Shorter passes instead of wild stretch plays, safer decisions at both blue lines, and less appetite for trading chances just to chase a fifth or sixth goal. It does not mean they sit back, but it does mean they care a lot about managing energy and avoiding the kind of pond hockey chaos that turns into a 7-5 circus. Then you get to the crease, where, despite the injuries, both sides have reason to feel reasonably secure. Carolina's tandem has been strong, with stats that match what your eyes see: calm, square goaltending behind a defense that does not hang them out to dry very often. Washington's situation looks messy on paper with Logan Thompson out and Charlie Lindgren banged up, but the actual results from that group this year have been respectable, and Stevenson is not just a throw-in, he is a capable safety net. When you combine competent goaltending on both sides with defensive structures that lean more toward control than chaos, it is hard to build a case for a pure fireworks show. So if you picture this one playing out as a tight checker where goals feel earned instead of handed out, something in that 3-2, 3-1, maybe 4-2 range more often than not, the scoring script tilts toward a quieter total rather than a free-for-all. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Toronto Maple Leafs versus Vancouver Canucks. Toronto rolls into Vancouver feeling like a team that keeps tripping over the same loose tile on the floor. 6 straight losses will do that to you. They still skate like a group that wants the puck, expects to have the puck, and usually does, even if the results lately have made their fan base mutter into their coffee a bit more than usual. You look at the way they attack, the way they still generate pressure in waves, and it does not match the mood of a team with that kind of losing streak. It feels more like a strong roster that has been punished for every mistake during a rough stretch. On the other side, Vancouver is in a very different place emotionally and structurally, and not in a good way. Their record tells a story on its own. 18 to 31 to 5 is not a gentle number to look at, and the goal differential behind it feels like salt on top of the bruise. Home ice has not really felt like home, with that 6 to 17 to 3 mark. The rink has been more of a pressure cooker where problems show up under a bright light instead of getting fixed quietly in the background. It is hard to talk about this version of the Canucks without mentioning that their starting goaltender is done for the season after hip surgery, which leaves them patching things together in net while also leaning on a lineup that has been thinned out by injuries to key scorers and important pieces on the back end. Honestly, that combination of missing talent and shaky structure shows up most when games get a little messy, when shifts drag on and matchups slip away, and that is a situation Toronto can handle a lot better than Vancouver right now. We already saw a glimpse of that earlier in the month when Toronto came into this same building and skated out with a 5-0 win, and the gap that showed up that night has not really closed since then. If anything, Toronto's desperation has gone up, while Vancouver is still trying to figure out how to simply hold water for 60 minutes. So when you step back from the noise, you have one team in a slump that still looks like itself under the hood, and another team that is fighting a deeper battle with roster health, confidence, and a home crowd that has not seen many happy endings this season. As our first pick for this matchup, the Toronto Maple Leafs money line is our full game side pick. Both of these teams have lived in games where the lamp gets a workout. Toronto's season has been full of nights where both nets are busy, and Vancouver has been on the wrong end of more than a few scorelines where the goals against column fills up in a hurry. When two clubs like that meet in the same rink, with that kind of recent history, you do not exactly get the vibe of a slow, sleepy 2-1 chess match. Toronto's recent stretch fits that chaotic profile almost too well. They have had games where they allow 4 or more goals in 4 of their last 5 losses, including that 7-4 run and gun show against Buffalo and the 5-2 stumble in Seattle, and those are not the numbers of a team clamping things down and sitting back. It is the look of a group that can score, but is also giving opponents plenty of room to breathe, shoot, and crash the net when structure slips for a shift or two. Vancouver has not exactly been running a clinic in defensive control either. January was basically a highlight reel for opposing scorers, with multiple nights where they surrendered 5s and 6s before that recent 2-0 shutout over Anaheim, which felt more like an oasis than the new normal. Nikita Tolopilo stepping in and stealing that game was a great story, but relying on that performance every night is a big ask, especially for a club missing so many important players in front of the crease. Here is the thing, when your main goaltender is out for the season after hip surgery and you are leaning on a mix of backups and call-ups, the margin for error shrinks fast. Take away Brock Boeser in concussion protocol on injured reserve, remove a skilled young defender like Zeev Boehm with a facial injury, and leave key guys like Philip Hronek and Niels Höglander bouncing around day to day, and you end up with a lineup that struggles to control games, not just survive them. That is before you even glance across at Toronto, who are dealing with their own issues, with Chris Tanev and Dakota Joshua both on long-term injured reserve and one of their top offensive threats in William Nylander sitting in that uncomfortable space where his status feels like a genuine game-time decision. All of that shapes the rhythm on the ice. You have two teams with negative goal differentials, penalty kills that wobble at the wrong time, and lineups that tend to open up once the first goal goes in rather than lock things down. It only takes one early bounce, one bad change, for this game to slip into the kind of back and forth trading of chances that feels great for anyone who enjoys offense and not so great for anyone who craves tight, stingy systems hockey. Toronto is not really built right now to turn this into a quiet defensive road special, and Vancouver does not have the personnel to drag it into that kind of game anyway, which pulls the whole thing toward a higher scoring script where goals show up in bunches, not in whispers. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Minnesota Wild versus Edmonton Oilers. You have Minnesota coming in with a strong record, sitting near the top of their division, and feeling good after a home stretch where they kept finding ways to collect points. Edmonton is on the other side of the ice with a very solid home record, and you can feel that their building has started to tilt games in their favor again, especially when they get that early buzz from the crowd. Odds makers have nudged the home side into that familiar role of modest favorite, not a total mismatch, more like a quiet nod from the market that says, yes, this team probably gets it done more often than not, but still leaving the door open for some chaos. What really tilts this matchup, though, is how Edmonton is built right now compared with Minnesota. Their offense has shifted out of that early season wobble and into something closer to a top-tier unit, with a scoring pace near the top of the league and a power play that is sitting at the very top in conversion rate. When that kind of power play stares down a penalty kill that is still under the 80% mark, it turns every minor penalty into a small crisis for the road team, and players know that feeling on the bench. Minnesota can still create offense themselves. They are not a grind-only team, but they are doing it here without two important pieces on the blue line, Jonas Brodin and Zach Bogosian, both still out and both normally trusted in tough minutes. Edmonton is missing Adam Henrique as a depth center, which does matter, but their primary weapons are intact, and their attack leans more on top-end quality than on pure depth. The home team also has something more emotional going for it. Their superstar forward is leading the league in points, sitting in the mid-90s with goals and assists combined, and recently threw up a 5-point night in a wild 6-5 win over Washington, then dragged them back from 3 goals down to beat San Jose in overtime. That kind of recent memory sits fresh in the heads of both teammates and opponents, and it changes how everyone approaches a third period when the score is tight. They have rattled off 3 straight wins at home, all with some level of comeback flavor, and have not had to leave town, which quietly saves energy while the routine stays normal. Minnesota, on the other hand, is shifting from a comfortable homestand into a cross-border game with a loud Canadian crowd, and that travel swing is not huge, but it does break rhythm. There is also the history between these two this season, which adds a bit of extra spice. Minnesota has already taken both meetings, once in Edmonton in a low-scoring shutout where they found that single breakthrough, and once at home in a more open game where they pulled away. In that second matchup, Edmonton was turning to Calvin Pickard because Tristan Jarry was on injured reserve, and the feel around the team was very different from where they are now. Tonight, Jarry is back in the rotation, carrying a goals against mark under 3, and the entire profile of the home side looks sharper than it did in early December. So when you line everything up, you have a Minnesota team that is tough, well-structured, and missing key defensive bodies, going against an Edmonton group that is rolling at home, carrying the best power play in the league, and firmly in revenge mode after being blanked in this same building. As our first pick for this matchup, the Edmonton Oilers money line is our full game side pick. Now, if you are here for drama on the scoreboard, this is where it gets fun. Odds makers have hung a high total that basically challenges these two offenses to keep being who they have been lately. And it feels less like a trap and more like a read of their recent style. Edmonton's profile screams high-event hockey right now, sitting near the very top of the league in goals per game while allowing a touch over 3 themselves, which is not what you see from a shutdown, low-chance team. Their power play is sitting first in the league in efficiency, that same 31.6% rate that makes every opponent reach for the Tums when a stick gets a bit too active and a whistle goes. The betting trends mirror what your eyes see when you watch their games. On the season, their schedule has leaned more toward games going higher than lower, and at home that tilt becomes even stronger, with a big edge toward contests that go past the posted total. 4 of their last 5 have hit at least 7 total goals, including that 4-3 overtime win over San Jose, the 7-4 show against Anaheim, the 6-5 overtime circus with Washington, plus the 6-2 loss to Pittsburgh and a tighter 2-1 setback against New Jersey. It is a pattern that says, when this team plays, there tend to be chances both ways, and it is not just one weird week, it has become the general personality of their season. Minnesota is not exactly dragging things into mud either. They average just over 3 goals per night and under 3 against, which sounds balanced on paper, but their recent game logs paint a louder picture. You see finals like 4-1, 4-3 decided in a shootout, 4-3 again in overtime, plus a couple of 4-3 and 4-3 type games, and another 3-4 result that keeps the pattern of 1-goal margins and steady scoring. So even though people sometimes still think of them as a slower, more defensive group, the actual results recently have looked more like modern, up-tempo hockey with momentum swings and multi-goal periods. The season series between these two is a neat little summary of the whole story. On one hand, you had that 1-0 Minnesota win in Edmonton, where Jesper Wallstedt put on a show in net, and Jonas Brodin scored the lone goal, the kind of game where every shot felt like it might steal something. On the other hand, there was the 5-2 Wild win in St. Paul, 7 total goals on the board, with Edmonton leaning on Calvin Pickard while Tristan Jarry was still unavailable. Those two games show the full range, from goalie duel to free-flowing, and tonight's context nudges things closer to the second picture. Coming in here, Minnesota's blue line is thinner without Brodin and Bogosian, and Edmonton's attack feels fully in gear rather than still searching for its rhythm. Both clubs are coming off recent games where they scored multiple times and pulled off comebacks, which feeds confidence on the offensive side and gently loosens the shoulders when players get the puck in shooting spots. Layer on the fact that Edmonton's power play is the most dangerous in the league, and Minnesota's penalty kill is sitting below that tidy 80% mark, and suddenly you can imagine not just 5-on-5 chances, but also special teams fireworks. Then there is the endgame factor, where close contests in the third period almost always bring pooled goalies, long shots at empty nets, and sometimes that extra late tally that pushes a total up one more rung. Could this still turn into another 1-0 game with a goalie stealing the show and everyone at home staring at their tickets in disbelief? Of course it could. This is hockey, and there is always a non-zero chance the puck just refuses to go in no matter what the expected goals say. But when you look at how both teams are actually playing right now, the way their recent games have landed, and the way matchups line up with a high-powered home power play against a weaker penalty kill, the script suggests more of a 4-3 or 5-3 style game than a tight 2-1 rock fight. That is not a promise. It is a forward-looking opinion based on current form and context, and it should always come with the reminder that no total is free money. As our second pick for this matchup, over 6.5 goals on the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.